Just, the Sun Tzu's method is largely the scientific method.
Right.
You just go through the process, and if you're paying attention, what to do kind of reveals itself over time. The problem with most people is they want to plan everything. They don't want to react to what's really happening right now. And adapting to what's happening right now and using what's happening right now works a lot better than any plan. What do they say in the military about plans?
Yeah, well, that they everyone has. Well, I prefer the grand philosopher Michael Tyson, who says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's the best version. You're right.
So, when you start eating some punches, it changes your whole plan, right? Like,
Yeah.
you always see those pre-fight boxing. I'm going to get out there. I got the best left in the game. I'm just going to keep sticking in his. Welcome to Books on Strategy, a virtual integrative book club for winners that we call MVP strategists. Each month, we have authors or recommenders of potentially life-changing books on to discuss their book, why it was written, and how it can change your life. And then on the second show, that's a pre-recorded show. On the second show, we have um, the author back on, or the recommender, and that is a live show. That's the third Saturday of the month. The pre-recorded show drops on the first Saturday of the month, and the live show, which is our community show, is on the third Saturday of the month. And that show is only as good as the questions you ask. Now, why does this show exist? Well, because, candidly, I'm called to do it. My name is Shawn Frost. That's my government name. And I, my history, you can read about it or whatever. But what's important to this community is that I was a loser who became a winner. And then I became somebody who helped other people win. And you see my clients on television all the time, making impact at a national level and international level. And now I've transitioned into being someone who not only helps people win, but I teach the people who help people win. And that's kind of where I am in my journey on strategy. I've spent the last 30 years uh, studying strategy and develop as both and I've been a practitioner of strategy. And that's what really is going to help you. This isn't just theory. Now, we will have stories that are inspiring, and you'll hear some theory, and we can get into some of the academics. But the most important thing about this particular community is that we're going to also focus on tools that you can use to improve your life, your family, your business, your nonprofit, or your community the next day. And that's kind of where we are focused, whether it's just creating a different mindset or the actual tools to help you achieve the goals that you're out to achieve and become the winner that you need to be. And I know that some of that may grate on you, but this isn't necessarily hustle and grind culture. There'll be some of that. We read some of those books, but it grows beyond that. Really, I'm just excited about the opportunity to grow a community of people who care about things and want to make a difference in their lives and the lives of others and make the world a better place. And that's really what this podcast, video show, and everything is about. And I'm excited that you're joining me on that. Now, our first book of the month is by my co-author of a different book, but he's my mentor, Gary Gagliardi. And we pre-recorded this a few months ago when the concept was called Florida MVPs. And it has since grown beyond Florida because, well, you'll see eventually, but now I head up the Science of Strategy Institute that Gary was leading at the time we recorded this original podcast. But the book this month is Sun Tzu's Art of War, plus Its Amazing Secrets, The Keys to Strategy. And if you, Sun Tzu Bing Fa, if you read Chinese or whatever, but that's the book. And you're going to see the pre-recorded conversation between Gary and I about the art of war and our time together, and get a little bit of background on me and Gary and kind of what shaped my mindset. And then on the third Saturday, we're going to be live. And that's going to be an interactive experience where we have a number of, um, we're going to have a guest, a primary guest. And hopefully Gary will be well enough by then. He has vocal cords paralyzed, so he may not be. It may just be me and the guest talking about it. But either way, enjoy the episode here with Gary Gagliardi about the art of war and its amazing secrets. Now for disclaimers. The views and opinions expressed may or may not be accurate or may not represent the views of our advertisers, MVP Strategy and Policy LLC, the Science of Strategy Institute, or Logos to Eyeballs Media LLC, who produces the show. So I appreciate you coming on today and talking about, there we go. That's better.
Ooh.
Full screen. Yeah.
Zoom.
Ultimate engagement there. So Gary is one of two folks that is in my main presentation on strategy. I have two mentors in the Sun Tzu world, if you will. I have Colonel Nick Pratt, who took me under his wing when I was in the Marine Corps in the 90s, and for no reason he allowed me to attend all these professional development. And he insisted on reading The Art of War and meeting every week to go over a chapter. And we did that for 13 weeks, and we toured through the book and really got to understand what it meant. And it's been a life changer for me. In, I think, 2007, 2008, I found myself in a situation where my company was being threatened with a hostile takeover. And I said to myself, what should I do? This is war. And I said, well, I should probably go back and read The Art of War. And through that process, I looked up who is the world's foremost expert on the art of war as it relates to business. And of course, Gary Gagliardi's name comes up. And this is one of the books that I read and I routinely give away. It's Gary's book, The Art of War plus Its Amazing Secrets. And it's a really great primer in strategy. So through that process, I came to know Gary, and then I actually started calling him and asking him questions and got engaged with the Science of Strategy Institute, and then ultimately became a trainer or whatever, and one of their master trainers who trained the other trainers. But really, that's kind of it for how I met Gary. But through that process, we actually went on to write a book together. The Art of War plus the Art of Politics, because I had decided I wanted to run for office, and Gary had run for office. I remember, and I said, hey, what would you do if you were going to run for office? And he said, you should write a book. I said, we should write a book. So it follows the formula of all of Gary's books, and pan over there to the bookshelf, you can see that I have dozens of Gary's books, and they cover topics like the art of war plus the art of management, sales, career building. They come in a number. You've written a book on everything, Gary.
On just every aspect of business and every aspect of life. I mean, there's one on romance. There's one on raising teenagers. There's
I should have read that one.
So many of them. It's ridiculous. Every time I turned around, somebody wanted, well, can't you apply this to? Oh, sure, I can do that. We'll do that. What the heck?
Well, what's cool and what people like about our book is that on the, as is the formula with all of them, is on the left page, it's Sun Tzu's words, and on the right page, it's what it means to that particular category, which in this case is politics. And, I've actually leveraged it quite well since then, not only winning my election, but being involved in a number of campaigns at different levels, congressional campaigns. And what's consistent factor is nobody thinks that we're going to win, and then we do. And which
is the best way to do it. I mean, that's the most fun for sure.
Well, but it also, if we stick to our doctrine or we stick to Sun Tzu's words, it's, winning those tough ones is not a sign of supreme generalship, right?
Yeah. Winning should be as easy as picking up a feather.
That's right.
It should happen more or less automatically without you hardly even intend. Well, you always intend it, but without any effort. If you're getting into challenges that require a lot of effort, cut it out. It's too hard. Let's not do that.
Which I've done.
Yeah.
I've stopped being a general consultant. I've actually started moving more in the direction of mentoring other folks to be engaged in that. But yeah, what I tell people is you should win on qualifying day. Right.
That's right? The old sales rule. You won the sale the day you qualified. If you didn't win the sale that day, you're doing it wrong.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, when you I was referencing more along the qualifying day of the ballot. So basically, winning unopposed is the
Yeah.
way to do it, right? But we've won an MVP. Gone on to win a bunch of really cool races like Congress McDonald's, and we were involved with school choice moms behind the scenes in Governor DeSantis's first election, which was razor thin. It's like
Hmm.
37,000 votes statewide. Again, that was another tough one. But I think he did it better the second time around, which I wasn't really involved in this campaign, but he won by 19.4, which was
Yeah,
a
that's a
record.
margin. That's a
That's a
margin.
that's a margin, and I won't get into any of that, but what that means going forward. But the simple fact of the matter is that the Sun Tzu stuff just works, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it works. Well, it works because it plays into the way our minds work. You try and boil it down to what really matters in the end. And, most people get distracted by all the shiny objects that come along, from here and there. But it comes down to just a few, just, the Sun Tzu's method is largely the scientific method.
Right.
You just go through the process, and if you're paying attention, what to do kind of reveals itself over time. The problem with most people is they want to plan everything. They don't want to react to what's really happening right now. And adapting to what's happening right now and using what's happening right now works a lot better than any plan. What do they say in the military about plans?
Yeah, well, that they everyone has. Well, I prefer the grand philosopher Michael Tyson, who says everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's the best version. You're right.
So, when you start eating some punches, it changes your whole plan, right? Like,
Yeah.
you always see those pre-fight boxing. I'm going to get out there. I got the best left in the game. I'm just going to keep sticking it in his face and keep sticking it in his face, and then he slides under it and busts your grill wide open. And anyway, but that kind of speaks to the thing of the difference between planning and we go to these. You and I have both done these corporate events where we
Yeah.
attend to their strategic planning department wants to talk to us, before we do our presentations and make sure that we understand what their strategic planning is and things like that. And then they usually get about 10 or 12 of our slides into the show and realize we're not exactly about to echo their philosophy of their highly paid departments of strategic planning.
Yeah. And all you're doing usually in those initial interviews anyway is you're trying to learn what their lingo is. The work I do on all my books is basically just translation. Everybody has their own language, and especially within the corporate world, people develop their own language. In politics, as you know, people have their own language. And a lot of this is just adapting Sun Tzu's ideas to the way people use the language in their specific area, and figuring it out.
Right. And actually, one of the things that we tell people before we even will do the show is, or the presentation, is that one of the main purposes is developing that same language, so that
That's right.
when someone from marketing talks about the terrain and what the market factors are and where we can capture the resources of the ground and
Hmm.
how the climate lines up to that, you know, um, it's really giving them those 5 elements of, a strategic position to help them have that common language. So
Yeah, putting it in
they
their own context so they can see how it's relevant to them. Because of the way our minds are put together, everybody's thinking about these same things. I mean, the weather, that is the climate, and the ground is, that's the environment we live in. We all have to deal with it, from our most ancient ancestors. They dealt with climate and they dealt with ground, and they had to figure it out. And they had to deal with, leadership, that is making decisions, and they had to deal with methods, that is working with others. They had to figure all that stuff out. So everybody's figuring these same things. And of course, it all comes down to the philosophy, your mission. People have to know what the heck it is that they want and what they're going for. And in today's world, it gets so confusing because you're bombarded with all this terminology and conflicting ideas and stuff, and we get out of focus from the really relatively the handful of things, literally 5 things that are really behind everything.
Well, I think that's a really important piece of it. And if you look at the graphic that you use and at the Science of Strategy Institute, which it's not the art of strategy, it's the science of strategy, which comes back to the recursive algorithm approach that you.
Yeah, and actually, I'm writing an article about why call it a science instead of an art. That's actually the article I'm doing this week at the Substack.
Oh, okay. Well, this will be a good time to pop this if you want.
A lead in. What? A lead in?
A lead in. There you go. Segue. Not the 2-wheel self-balancing device. The practicalstrategy.substack.com. You can find out more if you're listening on the podcast. It's practicalstrategy.substack.com. And that you can find all of Gary's work there. So as far as a common language, one of the things that I come up against is, and I've actually kind of embraced it, because it's not that culture eats strategy for breakfast, as I think it was Drucker said that. Someone said that. It's that if you're not addressing culture as part of your strategy, you're not going to eat breakfast. It's kind of my interpretation of that, right?
Yeah, well, actually, culture is the breakfast. I mean, that is the first thing you eat every day, whether you know it or not.
Right.
You're swallowing a bunch.
And we were talking about this in the show prep on our call last week, that politics is always downstream from culture.
Right.
And, it all kind of ties together, that strategy that doesn't include addressing culture, or at least acknowledging culture, or that doesn't push, in the 4 directions. We don't have the graphic up or anything, but culture is always at the middle, the philosophy, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, politics is downstream of culture, but everything's downstream of culture, because what we get exposed to in our youth, when we're kids, what do we learn first? We really learn the culture before we learn anything else. And that we get immersed in it in our teenage years. We don't even know who our family is anymore, because we're so busy being adopted by the culture. And so everything has to flow in some way out of that basic way of thinking that we got it as children and as teenagers, because that's when our minds are the most programmed. We have to build on that foundation, because it's the only one we've got.
So you said you wrote a book about raising teenagers. Is a big piece, and I haven't read that, admittedly. It's one of the many.
All right.
I haven't gotten that one.
I've written more books than anybody would want to read.
Won all sorts of awards, Ben Franklin Awards and things like that.
Yeah.
But as far as, would you recommend including, because I've actually toyed with the idea of like a Warrior Academy for kids, where you actually teach them strategic thinking.
I think it would be great. And actually, I have quite a few people that follow my work in prison. And they're saying, if we'd gotten exposed to this, in high school, we wouldn't be in prison now, because we would have had some way to think about moving forward in our lives. But, why do people end up in prison? It's because they're searching around for a way to make it, a way to make life work. And that's all they could come up with. And, they just don't learn any methods for how to see the opportunities around them. That's one of my big things, is there's so much opportunity around everybody, but we're just blinded to it because we don't know what an opportunity is. We just never learn it in school. Actually, most of what we learn in school is not all that useful, and everybody knows it, because everybody forgets it. The main schooling we get is really from the culture. I mean, and if you're raised on Grand Theft Auto, hey, you don't go on to college,
right? Well, I'll tell you that,
not that that's a good thing. I don't approve of college for the most part, but whatever.
Yeah, well, it's one of those where I've changed my stance on it quite a bit, and I still do some of it just because I think that it's somewhat useful. But I don't know if it was you that first shared this with me, the idea that if you look at someone with a 4-year degree, really just shows you that they can do something persistently for 4 years and accomplish a task.
Yeah.
And that's the real benefit of having someone come in and they say, okay, well, you can So from our world, like methods, you get methods, right?
Yeah,
So
well, yeah, basically, if you could get a 4-year degree, it means that you were able to party and drink for 4 years and still get the classwork done. Okay, good for
yeah,
you.
unless you're
You
like
can
an old,
multitask.
yeah, unless you're an old student like me, and it shows you can run a business
All right, yeah.
and do all those things, raise kids and still tick off those boxes. But yeah, I learned very few things even in my MBA program. I know you did an executive program at Harvard. I did some executive stuff at Cornell, and I
Mhm.
learned a few things like cash flow, cash is king, and
I
that's
learned
about
a
it.
lot. I learned a lot about balance sheet. I mean, really,
Yeah.
and I can't say it didn't. Went through Harvard for the specific reason because I had a fairly big company and I wanted to know how to cash in on it. And I can't say that it wasn't useful for that purpose
Right.
because soon after I did. But the problem with college is most of the people there aren't focused on the rest of your life.
Right.
Everybody leaves college and has a life to live. And most people go through college and become woefully unprepared for the real world. In our company, we were fairly successful, one of the 500 fastest growing in the country. And we stopped hiring college graduates.
Huh.
We would hire people that dropped out of college,
Right.
but we wouldn't hire college graduates in the area they were educated in. In other words, if they got a degree in marketing. Now, if you want to learn how to program, we might hire you there, but we're not going to, because you don't know anything about real marketing. Like, everybody learns their trade after they get out of college, and that's true if you're a doctor, a lawyer, or anything. I mean, that's why doctors, go through internships and
Right.
residencies so they can actually learn something, because you don't learn it, in the classroom, reading a book. I mean, you learn words, you learn some language, and that language can carry over. Gosh, going to Harvard, okay, you make connections with people.
Right.
That
That's the
seems
main
to
thing
be,
is the network and the connections, and just to be in that room from a
that's
strategic
most of
standpoint,
what
right?
people get out of going to Harvard, I think, is really they make connections. If they didn't have them from their family already, they make them when they're there. It serves a great purpose, because how you work with and who you know who to work with is a very valuable thing.
Absolutely. And
I
I'll
want
tell
to
you, in
go ahead.
politics, it's the same way, right? Like you get to be
Mhm.
in those small rooms. It means something when a member of Congress will respond to a text or return a phone call literally right away
Yeah.
if you have a situation or something stuck. And I'll tell you, you hit on this, like I think, and I'm about to make a whole segment of people who work in the same industry I do sometimes angry with me, but I think probably the most useless degree is political science.
It's funny because the first PhD I ever had working for me, it's when I was like 18 years old and I managed a hardware department in an apartment store. And one of my employees had a PhD in political science. And he actually
So
got
someone who
fired.
stocks shelves, like in a hardware
Yeah,
store?
right. Well,
Yeah.
that's the only work he could find. And he actually eventually got fired because he was trying to organize a union. It's like, I
But here's the
just thought
thing,
it was
like,
funny.
you know who I found the real hitters are people who, like, and not to toot my own horn, but I really believe my background in psychology is tremendously helpful in politics. And the other operatives I've seen that have a background in psychology, especially neuroscience, and when you start looking at like I recommend a few books on that. There's actually a book about the neuroscience of politics. I can't remember the title off the but
Gosh, I've
those folks.
been doing a whole series of articles on neuroscience lately. I've been
There you
doing,
go. There you go. Well,
I
that was my
just
undergrad.
yeah, I just
So
finished one on, I just finished a few on serotonin. Before that, I was taught. But anyway, you don't have to get into that.
yeah,
Go
but
out.
psychology or economics, because they
Oh
think
yeah,
they think from a policy standpoint, those are the folks who really get it. And especially like behavioral economics, like if you combine those
hmm
two, those folks actually really, really understand politics and of course communications, the ability
yeah.
to communicate. People ask me where I look for candidates, Toastmasters. Why? Because you're going to literally be able to watch them give a speech, and they are someone who believes that they need to develop themselves. So
Yeah.
that's helpful. But
Is the
so
is the ability to speechify still as important in politics as it used to be? I'm just
well,
curious.
I don't know because I stay over on the strategery side,
Yeah.
so I do less speechifying or I'm not a decider. I'm just a political hack, and I do some policy stuff. But So strategy. What even is strategy?
Well, it's a methodology. It's a system. First of all, it's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of seeing the world as starting with the fact that everybody is competing with everybody else and everybody is rating and grading everybody else. The idea that, we shouldn't judge is nonsense because we have to judge. It's the way our brains work. Our brains make hierarchies. And the kind of strategy I teach is very specific. It's about how to improve your position in the minds of others. In other words, everybody's got a little ladder in their head where people are positioned in various, not one ladder, they got dozens of different ladders where people are positioned. And your goal is just to move up in their opinion of you so that they will, work with you in various ways or reward you in various ways. So it's basically improving how people see you so that they can promote you or marry you or whatever it is you want out of them, or buy your product or whatever. But you're trying to move up in their minds, and it's all about what works. Sun Tzu's work, which this all comes from, was very interesting in that if you read most books on strategy, they talk about weapons and warrior formations,
Right.
and how to use this weapon or that weapon. And Sun Tzu never mentions any weapon because the only weapon that was interesting to him was the human mind and how the human mind works. And he realized that all wars are won in the head before they're won in a battlefield. And it all comes down to who's willing to join you and who wants to oppose you. If you get too many folks opposing you, you're screwed. If you get everybody wanting to join you and not oppose you, hey, things are going to be sweet, and that's basically what you're trying to do is get people to see that you have a goal that, they can have a part in, and, your success can help their success. And if everybody sees you that way, you're not going to do too badly in life.
So how do you attend to people who say that Sun Tzu is dark and that all of warfare is based on deception and all that? I know how I answer that, but I'd like to hear yours.
Well, yeah, it's a line from Sun Tzu,
Right.
that all war is deception, but what he means is that all war is perception, not deception. Most of this stuff is just, of course, I think I use deception in my book too. It's the commonly way it's the most standard way to translate that character. But what he's really talking is about how people perceive things.
Right.
And the idea is that we don't perceive reality. We're not that bright. What we perceive is our perception, the world that we see. And to make yourself successful, you have to defy people's perceptions in one way or another. You have to, produce more than they expect, or, make fewer mistakes than they expect or something. But you have to move up in their judgment of you. You've got to, in some way, defy what they expect. And, Sun Tzu phrases it a lot of different ways, but it comes down to, the fact that people perceive things in one way, and we want to change the way they see. We have to find a way to change the way we see things. And the methods of strategy are just methods for changing the way that people see things. It goes back to the phrase Jesus used in the Bible, which is translated as, what is it? Repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand, or something. But what that word really means, repent, is change your mind. And that's where it all starts. It starts by realizing that change our own lives, we have to change the minds of others. And there's tricks to that. That's all. There are easy ways to do that and hard ways. It's like you can work with gravity or you can work against gravity. I'm too lazy to do the latter, so I'll do the former. That's all. So That's all there is to it.
Well, some of my favorite stories that you tell, Gary, are about how you were a lazy salesman. That's what made you so successful.
Well, in the end. Well, once I read Sun Tzu, I failed a lot. I gotten fired from almost every job before I started understanding what was going on. I think it was my sister that recommended Sun Tzu to me, and I read a book and I began to say, oh, this is sales. And my first adaptation was a sales adaptation because I said, oh, he's writing about sales. Okay, I see how this works. So now I didn't get it before. Now
Well,
I
and
see it work.
and that's I think that's being fired and like an employee mindset versus an entrepreneurial mindset, and
Mhm.
basically beating your own path and betting on yourself, if you will, is something that Sun Tzu really talks about. And in fact, when we talk about leaders, Sun Tzu is very clear that, like, look, you hire the general and then you let him be a general,
Yeah.
right?
And his book was written for generals. It wasn't
Right.
written for people that want to take orders. If you just want to take orders, okay, you can
Well,
do that.
yeah, and then you'll live that kind of life. You'll be a foot
That's right.
soldier for someone else's orders, and I
And
think
you'll
that
go
really
wherever the flow takes you. I mean, you don't know, but that seems easy, but it's a very hard life.
it is, and I think that kind of ties it all together with strategos, the Greek for how generals think and behave,
That's
and Sun Tzu being the father of strategy, and it being about generalship. And I kind of extend that on to just leadership. Like, if you have to develop strategy, and that means being a leader, and that means understanding culture, that means understanding people and the psychology and all
and it
those
means
things.
taking responsibility. I mean,
Right.
that's the big thing, is that you've got to bear the weight. Responsibility is a big weight. Responsibility for your own life is too much for a lot of people. But then you have family, and if you start companies, you got employees, and they're all awake. You got to be up to be carrying it.
Right.
And it means facing up to the load. Taking it on.
And I'll
Or
tell you,
not.
or not, yeah, or
Well, I
falling
say
down.
that because I've spent like I said, I'm a lazy person. I've spent most of my life cutting away all the load. I mean, right now I'm as light as a feather. I hope to get as lighthearted so I can walk on water someday. That's
There
my
you go.
goal.
Yeah, I've got
It's
I've
the
got
whole thing.
a few miles to go before I sleep, to quote Uncle Bob. Well, and I'll tell you, you talk about managing your perceptions and things like that and carrying the load. I think that in politics, one of the things that I like to talk about is how hope and change, right? Hope and change. There's no hope requires faith. You're basically, if you're trying to inspire hope and change. And I'll tell you, when people are like, "Oh, Frost, you're a conservative guy. What are you talking about? Hope and change. Make America great again." How is that different from hope and change? Please.
Yeah, it's the same.
It is.
It's everybody has to have a dream and be following a dream. If you don't have a dream, you don't have a guiding light. If you don't have hope, you don't have a goal. You don't have anything. I mean, that's where it all starts, with that central mission, center of your life. And everybody has faith, whether they realize it or not. They believe in some, and the unexamined life is not worth living, because people don't know who they are and what's worth it to them. And people have to get all that straight in their heads before they can get their lives straight. They don't have to get it all straight.
Right.
Nobody ever gets it all straight. What
Just
a
one
stupid
guy.
thing to say.
One man got it all straight, and that's
Maybe,
a
yes.
maybe. Okay. Well, that's definitely for our next episode.
Yeah, I work in the world of probabilities. I never think of anything as black and white. I'm non-Aristotelian, as they say.
Okay.
Nothing's true or false. Everything is, well, okay. I'll go a certain distance on that, for
All
sure.
right. All right. So in our next episode, we'll talk about uh, your new project that you've moved on since. Science of Strategy Institute is Christ's words, and
Yeah,
translating the literal words of Jesus Christ, right? The Nazarene.
yeah, yeah. That's all I do. All I've been my whole life is a translator. I mean, as a salesman, all you're doing is translating, the product benefits the company comes up with, what the customer needs that the customer comes up with. Hey, I'm in the job of translating. That's
That's
all I'm
right.
doing.
You're
That's
just
all
a
I'm
Venn
ever doing.
diagram creator, right? And trying to create the
Yeah,
most in the
that's
middle
right.
there,
All I'm
right?
trying to do is find a common language, find out how people really think, so you can talk to them. It's that old problem of what you say isn't what people hear, and
Right.
what you meant to say isn't necessarily what you said, and what they heard, what they understood out of that isn't necessarily even what they heard. I mean, it's all probability. It's all trying to get it a little better all the time.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Gary Gagliardi. If you want to learn more about strategy and his work there, visit practicalstrategy.substack.com. That's practicalstrategy.substack.com. And tune in for the next episode.
I'm
Thanks for
just
joining
joking.
us, Gary. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
So we hope you've enjoyed this presentation of Books on Strategy. Be sure to follow us on all our social medias at Books on Strategy, and on the website, booksonstrategy.com, where we'll be posting up these videos, as well as YouTube, X, Facebook, Instagram, and anything else that comes up, we're going to lock it down. We're excited. I've really enjoyed my time talking with Gary, and I hope he'll be well enough to join us live. But if not, we're going to have a really exciting guest, and we'll have a conversation about this book. Hopefully, go read the book. That's the whole point of this, is to get folks reading great books that are going to change your lives, empower you to have, the individual life, the career, the family, the business, the community that you deserve, and to reach your highest goal and become a maximum value producer. We'll get into that in much more detail as we go. But for now, I've been Strategy Shawn Frost, and I look forward to seeing you the third Saturday of the month to discuss this great book. Semper Progredi, and God bless. All right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this presentation of Books on Strategy. If you know of an author or an interesting person you'd like for us to have on the show, just drop us a line at podcast@booksonstrategy.com, and we'll open a dialogue with them and see if we can get them on the show. Now remember, the world needs someone to do something about all its problems. If you don't know who that someone is, maybe that's your calling to just be someone. Never stop learning and improving your life, family, business, or community by winning small victories every day. Here's to your success. Semper Progredi, my MVPs.